Welcome to the morebusiness.com podcast. My name is Raj Khera. I'm your host and the publisher of morebusiness.com. Today we have a topic that is challenging. It is a difficult conversation. It is how to fire a person. We're dealing with human lives. We need to be compassionate. And I think we've all seen stories of just really harsh ways that people have been let go. This podcast is not about whether or not to fire someone. I think most of us would agree that we try to find better roles for people within our organization. What we're going to discuss today is really if there is no other alternative, and it could be for termination for cause, it could be for restructuring of your organization. There's lots of different reasons that employees might need to be let go. So again, we're not going to discuss any HR things. We're not going to discuss the merits of firing someone or not. We're just going to discuss if you have to do it, how to do it compassionately, and I hope you enjoy this discussion. Thanks for tuning in. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. This is the morebusiness.com podcast. My name is Raj Khera, your host, and I'm joined again today by Dr. Jeff Kaplan. Jeff and I were on the last podcast when we discussed leading with purpose. Welcome, Jeff.
Welcome. Hello. How you doing, Raj? Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you again. And so today's topic is about how to fire someone compassionately. This is a hard topic. These are hard conversations. Getting fired obviously is really hard, and firing somebody is really hard. And unfortunately, as business leaders, it's something that comes up. It's something that people have to do. So let's talk about it. Firing somebody with compassion, firing somebody nicely. In fact, I was just doing a little bit of research before our call, and there are a lot of people that are Googling the term how to fire someone nicely. They know they need to fire somebody. Maybe it's performance issues or something. But, I think for most of the time, most people, I would say, are nice people. And you don't want to be, rude or just really just do it in poor style. So firing someone nicely, firing somebody with compassion is really important. Let's touch on that. What are your thoughts on basically on compassion to begin with, and then we can dive deeper into conversations people can actually have?
Well, so the first thing, as you were speaking, Raj, the first thing that came to me was, this is one of those difficult conversations, right? So this is just, if you look at, the top 10 difficult conversations, well, this sure is one. Yeah. By the way, you're fired. I was thinking back 20 years ago, I was working with an HR director, and he was telling me, it's like, I just hate firing people. And I said, good. When it feels good, then it's time to change jobs.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I know. I can tell. I mean, from my own experience, I know in the unfortunate times that I, as a former CEO, had to fire people. I didn't sleep the night before. I was not in my stomach. And I just, I knew it was the right decision for the business. And in many cases, actually, I knew it was the right decision for the team member too, because they weren't a cultural fit. They weren't it was actually holding my other team members back from progress. And I knew that they would be a better fit somewhere else. And so, of course, it's devastating news to the person receiving it.
You just nailed it. That's the secret. I just realized in this moment.
What is the secret? What did I just nail?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll tell you on the next call. No, I'm just kidding. First of all, the reason that many people struggle with this is the same reason they struggle with any difficult conversation. They're uncomfortable themselves with difficult feelings. But the secret sauce is that you're holding the organization and the person that's being terminated together, right? I always say that, you make decisions from the head and then you carry them out through the heart, right? And so you make so that deep inside that the right decision for everything, and certainly for the organization, is that this person, it's just not a good fit for the organization. And because you have that wisdom to help you through the conversation, and you have the empathy and the compassion about this person, thinking about their family, the impact on them, how they're going to respond to it. And so you're holding both of them together as you have this conversation.
In recent times, we've read about stories where CEOs will get 400 people on a Zoom call, and while they're doing that call, the IT department is terminating all of their accounts so that the moment they're off the call, they don't have access anymore. Boy, does that leave a sour taste in people's mouth. You just, so like, look, this discussion isn't about the legal aspects of firing someone. Those things, you've got to follow the law, you've got to do the best practices, and that varies from state to state. So this, my little disclaimer, this is by no means this is exactly how you do it. The topic though is about love. It's about being compassionate, about being empathetic, and so I know of a story recently of someone who was terminated for, I guess it was performance, but I think, I don't know to the full degree the reason was, but the conversation, from what I understand, was just a little harsh, and this poor fellow had to go back to his wife and his 2-year-old kid, and feeling really small after that conversation, where the manager who had to release him wasn't compassionate, and just very matter of fact, hey, sorry, you're not cutting it, that's it. How should people approach this?
So a couple of things. So first of all, we reckon right before this call, I was thinking about kind of the 5 steps, right? We always love numbers, right? And so I was thinking in those terms. So I'll share that in a second. But I think, before I even go there, Raj, it kind of begins with a recognition that when someone has not worked out in a company, it's a failure on everyone's part, right? Like, I get curious about the hiring and screening practices. I get curious about the onboarding and the orientation practices. I get curious about the practice of supervision and performance development and performance improvement. I get curious about when something doesn't go wrong, are people being held accountable and being clear and direct and supported. I get curious about like all the different reasons why something doesn't work out. And then finally, I get curious about when you're at that last resort, how do you approach it? So let me just mention 5 things, and I can do a deeper dive if you want, right? So first is be prepared. Like, don't make the person that you're having to terminate like have to be with you on the messiness of you trying to figure out how this conversation should go, right? Do that beforehand, right? Be prepared, get all your ducks lined up, know what you're going to say, practice it. Second thing is put yourself in their shoes, right? So your typical empathy thing, like recognizing, to your point, that this person has a 2-year-old child, that they just bought a new house, that, that like, what if it were you, that kind of thing. That will help bring the compassion. 3 is be clear and direct. Don't let your own discomfort with like difficult conversations and conflicts have you do this weird 20-minute, take them on this long journey, and they're sitting here going, oh my God, are you firing me? Like, like, put it out there, be very clear, be very direct that you owe it to them. 4 is when they go, huh? Right. And then they start getting upset, angry. Don't try to make them feel better. You just fired them, but acknowledge and validate their experience. I know this is difficult for you. I recognize that, this is a difficult time for you. And I realize that this news right now is really struggling, and I can see it. And then finally, go through the tunnel with them, right? I heard an example a couple of weeks ago where someone was saying that in her last job, she was fired on a Zoom call, which I get, but that her boss was on for about a minute and basically said, I hate these conversations. You're terminated. I'm going, HR person's going to take over. And then like, my God, you just had a relationship for 3 years, right? Like, it was your responsibility to help make sure it works, right? And that's how you end it, right? So, years later, this person left a bad taste in her mouth. So there you have it. So, be prepared, put yourself in their shoes, be clear and direct, acknowledge and validate, and go through the tunnel with them.
I think one of the I don't know if it's a reason or an excuse that I hear that these conversations are very short is because of HR laws, and I think employers are afraid of getting sued. That if they say too much, that could be whatever they say in that type of conversation could be used against them. But there are a couple of I suppose I don't know if you want to call them best practices, but there are a couple of like rules of thumb. That one is you should always have someone else in the room with you.
Right.
That is not something that you just should have a conversation one-on-one and that's it. There should be a third party. And oftentimes, if you have an HR person, yeah, that's great. If your company's not big enough to have an HR person, then maybe another manager or something like that. I think those things are probably good ideas. The other side of it is you do want to give the other person to like ask any questions. Sometimes, and I've had this happen too when I've had the unfortunate situation when I had to let someone go, is they sort of saw it coming. Some cases, not all cases. Some of them are completely surprised, but sometimes people, they kind of know, and that is, I guess if you provide people, if it's performance related, people, you try to give people a chance, right, to improve their performance. You give them benchmarks, guidelines, PIPs, performance improvement plans. But then there's sometimes the business is just suffering with a downturn. We're in one right now, where the economy, inflation is completely rampant, and so sales are down for many companies. So companies are making that tough decision to cut. So when you have to do something like that, I mean, thoughts on like how a senior executive could manage?
Well, so when you were talking earlier, I said, oh, you want your don'ts, don't blame, don't defend, and don't make excuses. Right. And the whole piece around, talking too much is because, again, when people are uncomfortable, they either get in this weird trap of, going down this long alley of trying to, whatever, blame their boss, geez, it wasn't really my decision, or, blame the organization, or, or quite frankly, even blaming the person who's being terminated, right? Like, they are who they are. They have their shortcomings, right? Be very specific. Here's, the reason for the termination. Here's what's going to happen next. Here's the package if there is one. You have whatever time to look at that. Don't get stuck defending, because again, that's when you get, sort of, trapped. But anyway, but you asked about, basically you asked about in this, weird place where a lot of folks are having to lay people off these days, which, by the way, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the next year. Right. But what do they do? Right. I've seen a situation once where I was working with the HR person, and she was having to lay off at least 100 people. And then a couple months later, she was laid off. Right. That was part of their plan. Now, look, in some ways, in some ways that could have been done a lot better, but in some ways, I'm not sure how. Right. If you have a trusting relationship, then you can leverage that trust to try to be as compassionate as possible. But, particularly with larger companies, they're willing to take less chances on those kinds of things, and with good reason.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, to some degree, I guess there's a lot of really very highly qualified people on the market right now that were just unfortunately had to get let go because a company wasn't making so much enough money for payroll. So those are tough business decisions, right? So and by the way, if people are looking, boy, I know a lot of companies that are still hiring right now, especially in the marketing and sales fields. One thing I do know is that, like, if you're really good at one thing, like sales, for example, if you're a rainmaker, I think that offers you a little degree of protection, not like complete, but if you're the one helping to drive in money to a company, sometimes those things will play a bit of a role. But so like talking about like words someone could use. I know this is one of the reasons people might tune into this discussion is like, well, what do I say? How do I say it? So you talk about being prepared. So let's kind of walk through an example. Now, in my experience, I got a knot in my stomach, regardless, like whether I have to let somebody go for performance or because of some other issue. And so I don't think I'm really good at this either way, but I do I've had to do it, you know. And so I know that when firing for performance, getting back to that, uh, it there's stuff that you can point to, right? You can talk to,
Well,
here's what we set up as the improvement plan, didn't quite make it. What are some of the words that people should
well,
consider?
look, I mean, you know, the easiest way to do it, even if you have the ability, if you live in a state where you have right to, well, you don't need cause to fire someone, right? So different
Right.
states you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you don't need cause to terminate someone, you know, oftentimes, you know, you know, people that have been through this, they get a cringe. The audience is going to cringe when I say this, but, you know, I regret to inform you that we've done some reorganization and your position is no longer available. Then you switch to, you know, we're giving you, say, 3-month severance, you know, we're going to, you know, blah, blah, blah. Do you have any questions? And they say,
Mm-hmm.
well, you know, and in that case, you're really not getting into performance. You're not, you know, it's just, you're just basically repeating what, you know, in this organization. That is you know, look, sometimes it's actually the case. I mean, meaning that the reorg started first instead of, you know, we need to get rid of this person started first. And then we decided to quote reorg because of that. And then sometimes it's not that, but, you know, it's funny. I was just literally, was it yesterday that I was talking to someone about this? Yeah, just yesterday, I was talking to a client who just left his organization after 20 years for a much better opportunity. And this person was asking me, what do I say in the exit interview? How much do I tell them? And do I reach out to the CEO? He's one level below the CEO. So his boss, who's like, oh my God, I knew we should have given you this, you know? And look, there are reasons why he's not happy there after 20 years. But my advice to him was like, it doesn't matter. First of all, they weren't going to be able to meet the comp anyway. And, but I wouldn't even give him that because the other company this person's going to he's going from a public to private. So anyway, so, you know, so we spent, you know, most of the hour talking about how, you know, he should carry out his last week and a half in this current company. And at the end of the day, and the advice that I'm trying to give, which works on both sides, is, you know, just to know what the reason is, whether it's the reorg or whether on the other side, it's because it was a much better opportunity for me and my family.
Yes.
And then just keep repeating that, you know, just repeating that. And as they try to bait you, what was it because of this and because of this and because of this, you know, look, you know, I've been happy about those things, but this is really a much better opportunity for me and my family.
Yeah, you know, and it's interesting how you're right. It does go both ways. If you're leaving and you're a critical piece of the company, and you know, that's sometimes going to come as a big shock actually to your team members that you're going. But you're right. Oftentimes, it's, you know, there's a lot of reasons that you'd be able to unpack as to why someone goes. And you know, we just live in this litigious society that
Right.
words can be used against you. That
Yes.
it's crazy. And so,
Yeah, and no reason not to be nice. Like that. If
that's
there's one
correct.
takeaway from today,
Yeah.
it's you can be compassionate and careful, but you can be nice and direct. You
Mm-hmm.
be clear and, you know, and loving, you know, in that process. You know, and there are many examples where people got fired and maintained a good relationship with the manager that fired them over time. And that's when you know that you've been leading from the heart all along.
And I got to say, I'm very blessed that that's actually happened in several cases with me where I've known that the person wasn't a good fit. They sort of knew that as well, and we had to part ways. And like for one of them, actually, I ended up going to school again, and I ended up writing a letter of recommendation for him. So there are passionate ways to do it. And I think, kind of the point behind what we're having a discussion about here is, you're right. Look, there's the law, there's best practices. We're in a litigious society, all that's there, but you're absolutely right, Jeff. That does not mean you can't be nice. That doesn't mean you can't be compassionate. That doesn't mean that you can't have a conversation with love for somebody, and to understand that they've got a family, they're going to be in a difficult situation. So there's a little story. One time, I as a leader in my organizations, I've had to train people on how to manage this themselves. And the very first time you fire somebody is, wow, that is so hard. That is so hard, right? But to train other leaders, it's not like, hey, look, today we're going to talk about how to fire people. That's not how it works, right? It's when the situation arises, they get very uncomfortable, and sometimes they say, Raj, can you just do it? Can you just do it for me? I'm like, look, I can, but I would be doing you a disservice also, because if you want to be in a C-suite at some point down the road, this is one of those very unfortunate things that you have to know how to do. So you tell me, if you want me to take that, I can take that, but you understand that that's actually limiting your growth opportunity also. And they understand,
I'm sorry to cut you. Sometimes, particularly for a first time, I think it's great to have both in the room. And
yeah, I would never let someone do, hey, first time you're doing this on your own. Sorry, no, that would never happen.
Because you're modeling. Well, but I'm saying even taking the lead, right? Because you can model how it's done. I just knew a client a few months ago that literally that's what they did. Like the boss, right? You model for it, then you process it afterwards, and then they learn from that. And then the next time you're still in the room, right? And then they take more of the lead, and then you process that, and then they're on their own.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then that's probably the best way to do it. So if you're listening to this and you've never fired somebody, probably the best way to do it is to learn how someone else who is compassionate does it. Right. Hopefully you have someone like that in your organization. And hopefully you don't have to do this too often, because that's it's painful in itself. But you're right. It really touches on this emotion of, we don't like to be mean to people, right? I like being nice to people. I like it when people like me back, and this is not one of those actions that would be considered a loving action. However, I will tell you that there's people that I've had to part ways with in our company that are thriving in other organizations.
Oh, typically, yeah.
And it just wasn't a fit. And I think, it's hard to see in the moment, but then 3, 4, 5 months down the road, they've got their face is glowing, they're loving their new role. And in some cases, they'll even say, like, thank you for releasing me from what was effectively a ball and chain holding me back. And part of it was I couldn't let go either.
Well, that's where the wisdom comes in, right? Is recognizing, and quite frankly, at least it used to be this way, is it was something like 85+% of people that lost their jobs ended up in situations better. And sometimes it's that, and to your point earlier, sometimes they know it's not a good fit as well, but nobody really wants to pull the trigger. And in some way, you do it for them because you're loyal to the organization and it's the right thing to do. But and then if they get a severance or whatever, that helps them land, safely. And there's other things you can do, by the way, to quote, be nice, like giving them, exit coaching to help them transition into a new job. You can, if HR is, sometimes they give like health plans extended, there's different ways that you can show compassion that are more logistical in that process as well.
I think one of the things that that some people can do, and it maybe not when you have to do a mass layoff, like you're shutting down because of a divisional shutdown or something, but if it's smaller, excuse me, smaller, what you can do is reach out to your network and try to help people locate other opportunities. I know those are things that I've done in the past. It's worked out really well because I've got a nice network here in the Washington D.C. area and beyond, also of people that are in companies that could hire people that I've hired, and they know the level of rigor we try to do when we screen. We don't always get it right, but helping people.
Well, it does start there, doesn't it? I talked to someone recently who she went through 10 interviews, and this wasn't like a C-suite job. This was like a much lower level job. And they said, she says like they really do this, pretty intensive process of trying to hire people who are the right people and good fit. And then then there's no firing, then they don't leave.
Yeah.
But if you do have to get to the point where someone's to you have to let someone go, hopefully, you've already looked within the organization to see where their skill set would be a better fit, right? But sometimes it's also work ethic and other kinds of things that make it difficult, for them to fit anywhere in the organization. And quite frankly, sometimes people need a wake-up call, let's be honest. Like, some people just, are riding it out and they're not, it's a work value kind of thing. And, sometimes this does wake them up a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. There are like all kinds of situations in which someone has to do that. Yeah, do that termination call. But yeah.
So as we tie this together, think about that. Here's the ending thing from my point of view, that firing somebody sometimes in and of itself is a compassionate move, rather than keeping them and you stuck in a situation that's not working for anyone.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're a business owner, this is one of those really just, it's one of the thorns in part of being a business owner, or being a business executive is having to do this. And I think it's really important to do it with compassion. I mean, we're all on this planet together. We all got to breathe the same air, share the same water, and someone that you unfortunately have to terminate now. I think if you do it compassionately and they find a better role and stuff, it's a small world out there. You just might run into them in a different scene, different setting down the road. And I think that's really important too. So very good. Thank you, Jeff. I hope if you've tuned in today on how to fire someone with compassion, that you got some insights into, look, first of all, you're not alone if you're feeling like a knot in your stomach. That is very common. And being direct and being compassionate in your word choice, very important. So thanks again, Jeff.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Raj.
Thank you for tuning in today to the morebusiness.com podcast. We know this is a difficult conversation, and if you're faced with a situation where you have to let go of a staff member or a team or a group, do so with compassion. As we say, lead with heart, spread the love, and we'll see you on another episode of the morebusiness.com podcast.